Roger Curtis from Historic Environment Scotland. I hope a lot of people in the room know Roger already, but for those of you who don't, he's a chartered building surveyor, basically working on existing heritage buildings, but more importantly, within Historic Environment Scotland, he has been leading the technical team, and an awful lot of the work they're doing is actually challenging the assumptions of what people have about heritage buildings and how they perform, and actually going out and using the properties that his own as demonstrator projects of testing things out, and that information is then freely available to anyone. And I know, because I work all over the UK, that other organisations and groups in England and Wales look to the work that HES are doing as being, leading the whole sector in this. So Roger, I'm hoping, is going to be talking about retrofit.
Hi, thanks for the introduction. And also to SEDA for bringing me along. I was in the kind of retrofit research business from about 2008 till middle of last year. So I'm on a slightly different role with HES now. But I think the main takeaway for today is to try and think of traditional buildings as opposed to historic buildings. I'm from Historic Environment Scotland, but actually what we're interested in is the technical makeup of older buildings and having technically appropriate solutions and interventions. In Scotland, the numbers are quite big. 20% of Scotland's buildings are traditionally constructed. If you go into some older historic, settlements, city centres, it's perhaps much higher too. So there's big numbers here, and I would argue if we get it right technically, we get the right aesthetic outcomes as well. You probably saw me trying to work out how to move the slides on in some slightly ambiguous conditions. Here we are. Okay, retrofit approaches then, what I'm going to call conservation retrofit, which hopefully picks up a little bit of what Bill said. An example, I will apologise in advance if some of you have seen these slides before. I've chucked in a few extra ones as bonus tracks, so to speak. I'm quite big on counting the carbon. I would posit that our problems are resource problems, the way that humanity has been mashing through the planet's resources, aided by that liquid gushy stuff that comes out of the ground that basically gave us a free lift on all sorts of odd things, with the consequences that we now know about. And actually, one of my overriding things is not that energy is expensive now, is that it was actually much more expensive historically, and they were much more canny with how they used energy in different ways. So I think we've got quite a lot to learn from our predecessors. A bit of carbon maths, and that's kind of work in progress, but I want to introduce the idea of, at the heart of this is how much carbon do we chomp through in the interventions we make and the policies and decisions we want to apply to the built environment. And I think the built environment is a bit of a whipping boy for other activity. If we want to fly abroad twice a year, the transport lobby will lobby for more carbon emissions in their bit and say, housing, you come up with more savings. So, where are our priorities? So I don't think housing should take every single hit. We live in houses. That's our well-being centre, that's our shelter, that's a massive part of our lives, and I would suggest that we prioritise that over other things. And if we can't get carbon perfect in housing, maybe we accept that and do a little bit less carbon on the motorways and the aeroplanes and all the other stuff and the 1.5 cars that everyone has or what have you. So just a big pitch on written HES material. We've been writing and publishing. Sandy Halliday was very active with us from 2008 earlier. So we've written about a lot of this stuff. I know it's not the best way of learning information now, but please have a look. And a quick summary. So let's just bash into it. Okay, we were talking about the demolition of social housing. This is me watching the demolition of some 1930s era housing in Edinburgh, Craig Miller. There wasn't actually technically very much wrong with those buildings. I would suggest they were quite well proportioned, quite a lot of light. They weren't that well insulated, but hey, we can fix that. Yet the whole area was kind of so. The people, the district, the people, the architect was blamed for other failings, and I think it's very easy because bricks and stone can't respond. And I would argue, in terms of resource retention, I don't think that's a very good story. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. As a child, I was cursed to be brought up in the 70s. All I saw was demolition, and all I saw was those houses look all right. Well, why are they knocking that down? And that's as a 7-year-old. So, I've been noticing this stuff for a while, which is sometimes a curse. I coined this term a few years ago, carbon crime scene, for so-called retrofit. I didn't get round to working out the carbon mass for that, but I still think it's a moniker that is deserving of application in some circumstances. And I think the bigger philosophy of this, perhaps we can pick up this afternoon in the Socratic dialogue. So I'll just hit you with some sort of technical stuff now, but otherwise I'll wibble on for too long. Even the materials we put into the buildings to save energy have a long carbon tail, and some of those tails go on for longer depending on how that material sits, the off gas, the other stories that go with it. So I think we need to be cognizant of that. I think what is the nature of that refurbishment? People say, I'm restoring an 1860s house. I've gone back to bricks. And I thought, oh my God, that's partial demolition. Most of the house is in the skip, What nature of refurbishment are we talking about? And I think you've got to really balance the don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. And I think a lot of the themes we're seeing today is because we can model to 2 decimal places and our computers and things give us really accurate results, I think we've got to resist the urge to be too perfect. Complex, intensive, long programming in social housing, decant, and some of the costs associated with that. So quite quickly it spreads beyond the actual technical details. And what's the skip count? That's what I like to think. And if anything guides my approach in the pilots we've done about 30 over the last 15 years. What's the skip count? What are you taking out and what are you putting in? And maybe we look at it in a slightly wider factor, multi-factored. I call it conservation retrofit. I hope you'll pick up on it. And I'd like to suggest a carbon balance sheet for a building. So when you work out your retrofit strategy, you have a little ledger which says, okay, I'm going to replace this, do this, add this, whatever. What are the carbon terms? Building standards are consulting on that at the moment, or they're just about to start to. So this is probably coming our way. It's probably not soon, but maybe. I'm a skip counter, pathological skip counter. This is one of 3 skips in a so-called refurbishment of a 2-bedroom ground floor flat in Edinburgh. How the hell can you take that much out of a building without the stuff above falling down? I don't know. All of that's pretty durable, big sadness. All that carbon went up in the sky. Conservation retrofit then, less invasive, less cost, less disruption. You do have a lower operational performance. I accept that. But less landfill, less methane, upgrade what you have, retain embodied carbon, and the embodied craft. People made this stuff. They made it with quite a lot of skill and care, which I can't say for many manufactured products that we get nowadays, which turn out not to last very long. If I have time, I have a story about doors in a housing association near Perth on that one. And upgrading materials, sequestering carbon. So the material we put into a building is a carbon sink in itself. So that has somehow hoovered it in. Plenty of products out there, around the back, for example, and many others, where we can perhaps look at that as building in as opposed to a carbon cost. And perhaps picking up on a couple of themes, if you keep it low tech, it will last longer. I think obsolescence cycles are getting shorter, maintenance cycles are increasing. There's all sorts of folk in white vans running around the country servicing things at cost to the person when it's been put in. So I think we need to think about the complexity of what we do. And Historic Environment Scotland, we've had our fingers, if not burnt, certainly lightly singed on a complex project in the centre of Scotland where things aren't quite panning out. And we're 5 years down the line and we're not really properly commissioned yet. Is that a good situation? Oh, and there's lawyers involved too. So we'll leave it at that. We've done quite a lot of guidance aimed at homeowner level. I accept it's a detached building. It is quite measures-based. We've indicatively shown a cottage here, and we'd like to say these are technically appropriate, and if we wish to enter that argument, from the listed building consent side. So everything I show you here is listed building consent compliant. If somebody says to me, I can't do this because the planner said this, I'll say, well, the planner didn't read my book. We've got lots of options. You can't apply all of them, obviously, but there'll be some sort of option to suit your circumstance. This is a typology of a kind of standard Scottish semi-rural cottage. We've developed other typologies, and I do think in terms of retrofit and indicative solutions for individuals, for collective owners, that what you need is a set of archetypes, and the University of Edinburgh are moving in that direction. So that instead of giving a load of measures, which I've kind of done, is you give an archetype and what sort of things you might wish to think about for that building. Again, it's not dogmatic and it's not prescriptive, but it's kind of suited to the certain things. I know we've talked about individual heating systems for buildings. In a tenement, in an urban context, we must be in the district heating zone, I suspect. It's a kind of British disease that I want my own boiler, and actually I suspect we may need to think, but that's way beyond my ken. There's many more of you who can do more. Let's just briefly compare standard retrofit on the left with what we did, and essentially keeping internal linings, upgrade of windows and door, hemp bats and other products for the insulation wherever that needs to be. Passive ventilation maximized. As our temperatures warm, our heating season is going to get shorter and our cooling season is going to get longer. So actually, we need to think about the overheating, particularly in the urban areas where you've got heat island and other effects. So I think overheating is not a great thing. And my pet peeve will be ventilation, and I'll kind of rant about that if I've got time at the end, because we are in a COVID era now. We'll be moving into a different disease and health management landscape going forward. And if our buildings don't reflect that, we'll become very ill very quickly, and we'll move carbon from the housing sector to the medical sector. So we need to think about that. And we insult Victorians every day, but they did understand infection. Well, they didn't understand infection, but they knew how to deal with it. And ventilation and provision of health in an antibiotic, pre-antibiotic era was not as daft as we would like to think, sitting on our comfortable stools here. And I'll draw your attention to a little bit of literature on that at the end, because health actually, what is the building for? Well, it's to keep us alive and warm, but actually healthy is a big deal. And I hope you enjoy my little glyphs that try and show that we can achieve energy reduction, we can achieve carbon sequestration. I'm not saying it's necessarily cheaper. It is a similar order of spend. And until we get decent market penetration by some of the new entrants exhibiting at the back there, larger parts of the industry will always make it jolly difficult for new entrants to come into the market by pseudo-testing results, by making it hard for people to come in, inventing a bit of bogus science to claim their stuff works and one's other stuff doesn't. And I'm pretty cynical about all that, and good luck to all you innovators. Right, very quick example then, classic heritage gingerbread cottage. It's an extreme example, but it's quite a good one because the form factor is all over the place from an RDSAP modeling point of view. It is detached, so it doesn't have that efficiency. Category B listed, in a World Heritage Site, in a conservation area, so there's quite a lot stacked against it. An appalling EPC, done casually, probably via Google Maps or whatever it was done, F, demolish it immediately, carbon criminal, all that stuff. And we did quite a lot to it, I accept. Part of this work was done as a shop refurbishment, so again, it wasn't sort of domestic retrofit cold on its own. We got to EPC band C, and that's without looking at the heating arrangement. So we've got a slightly wacky heating arrangement, but which is going in, and I'll hopefully come back to you in a year and tell you the good story on that. But maybe standard renewables, as you've been discussed, a heat pump or something like that, would also nudge that to the top C and possibly even B. Please read about it in the link below. Learned a lot, obviously. There's things I'd do a little bit differently, but in terms of the material choices and the suite of options on a category B listed building, including double glazing, floor insulation, quite a lot of things that you've heard about, I think it's a reasonably good story. That's what some of the wood fibre looked like on a floor going down. That's what the finished thing did with salvaged boards that we put back down again. I would argue in any retrofit, if your feet are warm, the rest of you will be able to sustain other internal temperatures much, much better. It also does a lot for airtightness. The airtightness story in this project is not great, mostly because we got the windows wrong, or the windows draft stripping wrong, but that was my fault, and we could have probably done better. But floors have been hacked around by everyone. There's things to look at, there's services to look at, and things to repair and make better. So the insulation I showed you is, if you're going to do something, I personally would start with that. Lots of glazing interventions, various stories on double glaze units. The market is maturing very quickly. So actually there's good technical options, including vacuum panes now that are coming in that are becoming vaguely affordable and performing with the durability that people quite rightly expect. Lots of stuff in the roof, went for a warm roof with various arrangements going up on the roof pitches. Pretty standard stuff there. I'm afraid there is some aerogel in the building behind that plywood because it's suited to insulate the door, but there's other materials are available. We did a bit of interpretation or getting people to get a feel for how we address the solid wall side. Uninsulated, 600 thick sandstone wall, dry, U value of about 1.2. With various interventions, you can get it to 0.7 relatively easily. Quite a lot of disruption for the building. For my money, I might not have done it, actually. But we did it because we were very much in the EPC landscape. Now, whether EPCs are the best way to go, you'll have your own views on, but that's what we were being hit with. So that's kind of where we aimed things. I think there's other ways of assessing performance that you will all have views and better ideas on. Another project, just to give you a feeling for what something like this looks like. Insulated floor, that was actually sheep's wool as it happened. Secondary glazing, a perlite product behind the lining there, wood fibre on the roof, infrared heating over the thing there as a heating option. Very early, controls weren't great, but in terms of a healthy heating environment, and we touched on studies in the Netherlands that indicate the nature of the heat you provide people and the activity, etc., it's probably an option to progress. I'm not saying it's massively the answer. We took out the oil boiler and we replaced it with this. The running costs actually came up about the same, so it wasn't a financial magic wand by any means, but depending on other metrics, it might have a place. Big factor of ventilation. See that? A hand mechanically operated quarter light. Nothing can run out of battery. Nothing can go wrong. You've really got to pull the string. And if you're going to overheat, you let the hot air out the top and you draw cool air in the bottom, preferably under the floor. Guess what? This building used to have it. Guess what? It's not available now. And I wonder if these have been, well, they haven't been cleaned for quite a long time, and I wonder if they're even switched on. You can see the legacy arrangements where there might have been a passive system. Robert Boyle, Glasgow inventor, in this very city, 1876, patented a passive ventilation system for public buildings in this city, and they were everywhere. And what have we done in the past year? We've removed it and put in some humming, D minor vibration, lots of energy, humming away. Is that affordable? Is that fair to give that to a client who may be a charitable institution, who may not have the money? And when I see it in churches, I weep, because churches, have less than no money. Anyway, that's a bit of a ventilation rant. I apologize for that. Picking up on traditional features, what they can do for you, what they can't do for you. We deliberately reinserted a hearth that my predecessors in historic Scotland had chucked on the skip, not to show that fogey living circa 1870 is for all of us, but to indicate if you have a ventilation and a cooling problem in a heating climate, these things might be built into your building already. I was astounded when I saw a study from DCMS about overheating in London, and nobody mentioned existing passive options. Even, I'm not saying it's going to answer everything, but it's a bit of a start, surely. So I was quite curious about that. And the damper on it, hey, they're crazy, those Victorians. They didn't know what they were doing. So you could close this off when the weather was moving or the wind was puffing harder than you want. I won't dwell further. Come a bit further with internal wall insulation. Certain architectural styles, perhaps the older, more vernacular, do lend themselves to insulated lime plasters. This is a project in Dunbar called The Ridge. Please get there if you can. Some interesting lime hemp combinations on the walls. Gives a very nice sort of feeling. You can all walk into a room and know when it's working properly, when it smells right. You can get that balance. Some people are very good at wine and how it tastes and smells. I drink a lot of it, but not very good at it. But I can walk into a room and a building and go, something not quite right there. Ooh, 1970s plasterboard, that's a bit damp. or worse, and so on. So this is the first coat of a hemp lime mix going on to the footings of a building that's probably about 1680 or so. And if you're keen-eyed architectural people, you'll notice the floor height, not very good modern floor, but this is the original floor height that was raised in the 19th century to around this level. So this just shows a little bit of that. Dying to do some analysis and just see how long those have been in there. Anyway, that's a totally separate topic. But the point is, you can do it where your architectural idiom, where your condition suggests it. A fire maybe, or you're converting a steading, or something where you've got a slightly freer hand. This again, in a more sort of formal domestic context, this is a property. That flat bit there is a lime hemp mix directly on the hard. That's a brand new double glazed window. So to give you a feeling for where it can be applied and how it might look, you tap it and it's just got a hollowish feel to it, which means there's air and sort of stuff stuffed in there, which is always good in my view for a sort of quick feel on insulation. Ditto, this is a sort of same side as the other house. We talked on keeping buildings dry. I think an awful lot of what we might call building pathology problems or building physics problems are actually caused by poor external detailing and finishes. And in fact, with more rainfall coming, so we're getting wetter, Scotland's getting wetter, we're going to have to pay more attention to our outside detailing. So again, condition and all that stuff. That was a new window, double glazed. That was £1,100. So, it is expensive. I'm not expecting you all to do this. This is just one example. I'm showing you one end of what might be possible. Hey, shutters, crazy that. They're always there. They've been there for a while. Energy saving, yes, I've proved that in one of my very early technical papers, and also the security factor, because that is very relevant in some parts of Scotland. Just chuck this in on the ventilation script. I was melting in a meeting at Heriot-Watt University. Hope there's no one there from there. In a July afternoon, thinking, Christ, deodorant. I looked up and I saw, oh look, there's a little vented cupola there. Aha, no, it's been closed off. So, in a top floor room in an urban heat island, these sticky uppy glass things with vents in the top are a really good idea. And use those vents. That's why they were there. Not to give us howling gales in the winter, but to give environments that were not going to heat stress us in the longer heating periods that we might expect. It'd be boring of you to make you read this. You can get this, but this is the housing trust on the edge of Perth, built in the 1930s. Some very interesting approaches to public health and healthy buildings in that development, which went from about 1924 to 1936. And it was they who paid £1,500 per brand new, uber wonderful, fantastic, low U-value front door. The 1925-30 doors all went in the skip, about 40, 50 of them. 6 years later, these modern doors had to be removed because the locking mechanisms failed, they no longer fitted. So, we can have everything we wish for in terms of certain things, but be very, very conscious of the lifetime of that product. And anyone who gives me a guarantee, 10-year guarantee, well, frankly, your project, your product is perhaps not it for me, because I want 100 years. Why not? The previous lot were nearly 100 years. Why can't you give that? And of course, a guarantee is just an insurance policy that company has got the financial muscle to pay for. All that is, it's not a quality guarantee. It just means that when something goes wrong, they've got an insurance policy to cover the replacement. So just be careful of guarantees. I know with double glazing it's relevant, yes it is, but understand the economics behind a guarantee system, which is not always quality based, although it can be. Anyway, sorry, right, so back to the building then, this EPC band C with options over and above that, with some cunning use of renewables, and I think that's perhaps the next journey. Proportionate refurbishment, get what will the building take given what you have in front of you, how far can you get it in terms of the energy efficiency stage, and then look at the heat source and where you go. So I'm kind of talking fabric first, but definitely proportionate fabric first. Now where that goes, I think there's quite a few options with what's sometimes called carbon displacement. energy storage, a federated, dispersed way of storing surplus energy during the grid, when the wind blows, or letting it back out when the wind doesn't blow. All a bit advanced at this point, so this is kind of slightly blue sky thinking. But at the moment, we have some of these items purchased, ready to go into that lodge, and the heat system will actually be stray heat from computer searches on a server under the stairs. So you know, that's got a bit to go yet. I won't wave that too loudly right now. In terms of counting carbon then, and this is a project that we kicked off a few years ago, Chris Morgan has been leading on and some of his team have been leading on the maths. A little ambiguous in the outcomes, if truth be known, but I tried to just take this carbon balance sheet thing slightly further forward with some sort of nursery level maths from me, and how we can look at the house in its biggest stage, proving it, doing the carbon maths, using typologies to give us a feeling for how these different buildings will work. We had scenarios of demolition, full retrofit, massive modern, you know, hitting it really hard beyond deep retrofit, and then conservation retrofit. And actually, doing nothing was clearly pretty bad. The demolition gave you an equivalent, but then you get into societal questions of what do you want your built environment like? Where do you want to put your effort? So I think that report will come out fairly soon and give a bit of a steer, but what it does show is doing nothing is not really an option, but how you do something is a bit more even across the piece, depending on what our societal and aesthetic and community aspirations are. What do we want a refurbished environment to look like? That's just 3 of them. There's a few more, so that we have got a handle on the Scottish housing template on the older stuff, and many other folk will be doing stuff for the more modern stock. So actually that gives us quite a big suite of typologies to work from, I would like to think. Sorry, another skip image. Anyway, written guidance. This is the later version, November 21, of the retrofit guide. Lots of options here. This is not Historic Scotland says how you do it. These are a series of ideas and options for the different bits of fabric that you may have. And therefore, you know, take a look, see what you like, see what you don't like, and see what you can mix together to give you what you need. Lots of options for windows, options for floors, not quite so many options for walls, but hey, if you get everything else right, maybe you don't need to worry about the walls. Wind-driven rain, climate change, long tradition of external wall coverings in Scotland. Why not insulate that a little bit? Why not? No reason why not. Anyway, moving on then very quickly. This is my indoor air quality health rant piece by Dr. Richard Hobday, medical historian and indoor air quality person with a very strong medical focus, particularly the germicidal aspect of things and the spread of disease and how one manages that in a post-COVID world. And I think healthy building environments equals healthy people, equals lower carbon costs on other parts of society. And there's a link to that as well. So architecture and health in traditional buildings. It builds on other stuff we published a while ago that you may wish to dig into. And I'll stop right there because you're hungry and it's 10 past. Thank you.